Good to have you here on this Thursday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett. A lot to get to here on the show as the Combine really getting underway. And a lot of talk about what the Jags are doing at number one, how that kind of sets the tone for the draft, even though most people think they are going to go offensive tackle, whomever they choose. They're at number one. We'll look at that. Also, I will talk with Lawton Swan, Clemson Sports Talk. The Tigers back at it at spring practice. What's the latest from them? As a lot of people looked at Clemson last year, BJ, you looked at the start and you said, boy, Clemson was really disappointing last year. And then you go back and actually look, were they as dominant on the scoreboard as they once were? No, they still won 10 games. They were all right. They lost to Georgia, who won the national championship, had another slip up in there. Outside of that, they were pretty good at the end of the day. So Lawton Swan will join us coming up in hour number two. Also in the final hour, Mike Bratton, SEC Mike of that SEC podcast, will join us. And Matt Marshall of the Orlando Sentinel will join us. We'll look at Florida State spring practice opening up. Could the Seminoles once again start to become a player there in the ACC? He'll join us coming up in the final hour of the program. But lockout continued there on Tuesday when the two sides couldn't reach an agreement, BJ, and smiling through his frown, I'm sure is what Rob Manfred would say. They had to cancel games and said, hopefully we'll meet again on Thursday. Well, there was a meeting, just no owners and no players were there. MLB Deputy Commissioner Dan Hallam and MLBPA lead negotiator Bruce Meyer, they resumed talks. Okay, they were all representatives doing the negotiating, but none of the principals involved were there. They met for about an hour and a half, according to reports, and it was the same tone as Tuesday, and no progress was made. So there you go. There's the very latest.
Kevin,
baseball.
I mean, listen, that story goes back to what I've asked for the last couple of weeks, and I'm asking you because you're the expert. What changes? I mean, you have a good sense of kind of where the disagreements are. I know you've followed this since the beginning. I mean, if the owners feel this way and the players feel this way, and I think we all agree that the players are being very reasonable and the owners are being very rigid. But if we were willing to miss games up to a month, reportedly, from the owner's perspective, what changes? And look, with all due respect to the viability of that meeting, I mean, that almost sounds more like a lunch. Hey, let's get together and, hey, we still want this. We still want this.
What these guys were telling me.
All right.
What did your guys tell
you? What'd you get for lunch? You get the salad? I mean, listen, what tangibly has to happen here, and what is the motivator? What is the catalyst for the owners, I think, being a little more reasonable in all of this? Because I thought Jason Hayward's stance yesterday was really accurate. The owners know kind of where the line is for where they can make money, when they lose money, kind of where it all starts and ends. What's different today compared to yesterday, and what's going to be different tomorrow compared to today?
Nothing. There won't be, and we don't even really know when they're going to meet again. But I would tend to agree, BJ. The temperature of the room is the owners will move when they're ready. And we say, well, what does that mean? When they're ready to start making money. That's it. And if people say, what do you mean? Well, April, a lot of teams don't make a lot of money because typically when you go to, say, Colorado or Detroit or places like that in April, it's still kind of cold out there. And we've even seen early week of April games where it's snowy. Of course, you got people in school, people who don't necessarily want to go to the ballpark, with their family at 7:00 and be there till 10:30 and then, get up, go to work, go to school. So attendance is a little lower. And usually there is a corresponding surge in May when school gets out, right? You get to May, you get school starting to come out. Kids start wanting to go. The parents don't care as much about later nights. Kids will go there. You see classes go there for trips and in day camps and things like that. Typically, you get a attendance increase once that happens. And then, of course, once you get to September, you're talking about playoff pushes and playoff games, and people show up for that. So they know that April largely is a debt month. And I think, again, this is what is interesting about the negotiations now that you have social media, is the players have essentially called you out on this. So it's like you're playing this card knowing good and well. I'll be interested to see if they're like, okay, fine, we'll start the season May 1st. Like, that was the plan the whole time, basically. Like, we're going to make our money regardless. And basically, whenever the deal's done, the players can come out and see, we told you they were not being good faith negotiators. We told you 2 months ago they didn't want the season to start till now because they'd start making money here and they would cancel a quote losing month of revenue. And what happened? As soon as it got to that point, they said okay and started moving on some things. So I tend to agree though with you, BJ. If I'm the players, if you really want them to change and not just say okay, fine, like what's the difference? Obviously, there's big salary, but if you really want to affect the way the game is played and operated, do you just say go to the mat? What's the difference in 30 games and 50 games?
Well, let me ask you this, because this is the question that I've seen a lot of people ask on social media and in blogs and stories and articles is the MLBPA, even though obviously the downside is significant, not only in terms of money missed, but do they kind of have to do this for the big picture betterment of the sport because of what the owners are doing? I mean, as you pointed out a couple of days ago, the I guess revenue split, the correlation between growth and what the MLBPA has gotten is not on par with other sports. And there are very reasonable points of contention. And I know what Mike Trout and others have come out and said, we're not only doing this for right now, we're doing this for the next wave of players. I mean, you've always talked about who does the public side with. I think the public here is siding with the players, and understandably so, even though everybody wants baseball. But the players kind of have to do this.
Yeah, I think so. And unfortunately, as it is in a lot of labor v. Management situations, management can hold out longer. There are a lot of guys in the league that need the paycheck, and you say, well, what do you mean? They're all making good money. Okay, well, there are guys that might be on a major league roster that only played 4 weeks of the season last year. They didn't make $700,000. They made
and I do want to say this too.
But
even if you make a lot of money, you may have a lot of bills. You think about the bills you have to pay each month. I mean, this is a significant thing.
You live a lifestyle accordingly. If Mike Trout, I mean, again, people say that, oh, cry me a river. Well, it's like if you made $40 million a year, you probably live a lifestyle accordingly to making $40 million a year, i.e. you're probably not living at a place that charges you $300 rent a month.
Yeah, but some of the guys that don't make that kind of money, I mean, you might have expenditures that are locked in that are significant. Yeah. And then as we talked about, not to mention, obviously, tragically, everybody that makes money directly, indirectly off of baseball and the economic impact is overwhelming. It's significant across multiple fronts for countless people and entities. But how do you kind of view this from the player's perspective? I mean, Ben always talks about leverage, right? When you're a player, how do you weigh all of this?
Well, I mean, if you're the players, you have to say, okay, are they just waiting to their point? And then I think that's the game of chicken again. We're just back to the next game of, do we wait to the point where they start to get serious about, okay, now we really need to make some money, and this is the point where in the season we typically start making it. All right, here's the deal. Do they actually move off their numbers and this was all a game, or are they holding fast? And if they hold fast, I think if you're the players, you have to take this thing down. I mean, it stinks as a fan because I don't want any of this. But I think if you're the players, I don't think you cave at the first sign. I mean, because you heard players say, look, we've known about this since the last CBA we signed. There's been growing contention, growing animosity, and we've been preparing for something like this is going to happen. And so I think on some level, they are prepared to, and the Players Association, as I understand it, is providing, money to players and things of that nature to cover them while this is going on. But I think if you're the players, you have to deliver it in a way that the owners are going to feel a little pinch here. And if you're going to make a move, and how do you do that? Because in the back of the mind, their owners are probably like, oh, these guys are ready to play. We'll just cave to a couple of things and we'll get it done. And we'll be back May 1st. We'll all make our money. And who cares if we miss 20 games? I think if you're the players, you're like, no, we want you to really move. And if we have to miss 40 games, 50 games, then we'll keep declining what you send us until you get serious about it. And again, everybody loses in that scenario. But once you cancel the first games, and I know the players didn't, but once the first games are canceled, I mean, like you said, what's 10 more? Right? I mean, what's the difference in 10 games and 20 games?
I just worry, and there's so much to think about. It's so complex. And again, I really appreciated Ben's perspective on kind of what it's like being a part of a players association when he was in the league and using the leverage you have. But I guess the question I keep going back to is, how do you make the owners change their mind? I mean, how do you make the owners be a little more reasonable? To use that phrase you've used, good faith negotiation. How do you force that? How do you change what was a, I guess, immovable perspective a couple of days ago, willing to lose games, to now we are actually losing games, and every day is a step in the wrong direction? How do you get them to see differently?
Well, I mean, you simply, I think, again, and you would think somebody's already done this, but if I'm in charge of talking to the Major League Baseball, I would say, look, fellas, at some point, I get you want to dig in, but you have to realize you are cutting off your nose to spite your face in this situation, i.e., you're fighting for what you want, but at the end of the day, you're going to lose. You're going to lose revenues. You're going to lose fans, which affects your bottom line, which means, hey, your franchise is worth a lot. You know what? Hal Steinbrenner's franchise, the Yankees, they're going to be worth money no matter what. What about you, Florida Marlins? What about you, Colorado Rockies? You might actually see some depreciating value in that investment if there's no product.
But for all the talk of the fans don't matter in all this, at the end of the day, is that
the fans are a bargaining chip?
But is that potential of the game losing popularity, fans not coming? I mean, is that ultimately kind of where the owners are open to maybe some movement?
I would hope so. I mean, if I'm looking at Major League Baseball, I say, look, with the variety of options that are out there, why would you want our partners, and by partners, I mean advertisers, sponsors of Major League Baseball, both in the ballparks and nationally, why would you want them to go anywhere else? And again, people say this, there are places where they can spend their money, right? They can go advertise in Major League Soccer. They could go advertise in NASCAR. They could go advertise in the NBA. They could go advertise in golf. They could go There are other entertainment. I mean, we see professional cornhole leagues getting TV time on, and they have, I mean, you can spend your sponsorship dollars to reach an audience elsewhere. Why would you want to push them away by them looking at you going, are you guys going to have a product here? And if you're not, then while you're bickering over here, we're just going to go do that. And I think that may be a point. Not to say that they'll just jump ship, but I do know that companies aren't going to sponsor things that don't happen, right? I mean, you can't sponsor Major League Baseball if there's no Major League Baseball. You can't sponsor the All-Star game if there is no All-Star game. So I think that's one of those things where you look at the owners and say, look, you are trying to, some of you are, and from kind of what I've heard behind the scenes, some of the owners that are trying to, quote, bust the union are the ones that, are coming off like Ebenezer Scrooge. You're like, dude, you are one of the cheapest owners out here. And you're over here crying about, oh, we're going broke. You are literally taking money from the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Dodgers, who are paying to supplement you, and you don't spend it on your product, which is why people want to show up. People in Miami have made it very clear. We are not going to support the Marlins if you keep doing this crap. We want you to put a competitive team out there and maintain a competitive team, not give us a 1-2 year window and then blow it up and we stink and lose 90 to 100 games for 8 years. Not going to do it. We see, I mean, and people say that, BJ, we see this in all levels of sports now, where the prices of tickets have gone up, the prices of donations in college football, sometimes to even get on the ticket list, have gone up. And if you are not competitive and not good, you will see a drop, right? I mean, look around college football. I know you can say, well, what about, I mean, look at teams who struggle. Towards the end of the year, not a lot of people showing up in the stands. Not to say the tickets weren't bought, and maybe they don't care, but, you start looking at teams that are not good. A couple years ago, Duke was winning 7, 8, 9 games. They started losing again. Bare seats everywhere. Georgia Tech, Jeff Collins, had a horrible year last year. Come to Georgia game, there were no Georgia Tech fans to be found in that place. They weren't going.
But I think it's especially true.
Just microcosm all over the place
with Major League Baseball, though, because like you said,
you're not, people aren't going to go.
Like you use the example of the Marlins and the teams that literally aren't trying to win. Like fiscally, they are not investing what it takes to be successful. It's hard to then be a fan and look around and go, well, I got to go spend $100 or maybe more to take my family, or $200 to go to a game where the team we're playing has a payroll of 180 million and my team has a payroll of 30 million. And it's hard to justify that. I mean, it's hard to get involved and be emotionally connected.
Well, I mean, again, I look at a case in point. Cleveland had one of these most ridiculous streaks of consecutive sellouts. There, I guess it's still called Jacobs Field, but had a huge thing of it. Then they start selling off high dollar athletes, and then they've kind of made it known that, hey, we're in a rebuild, we're going to stink for it. And then what happens? Fans quit coming. They don't want to hear, like, if you announce to the public we are in a rebuild and it's going to be a minute, we're not showing up, right? I mean, even when the Braves went through their restructure, people still went, but not in the numbers they did.
And I think occasionally that's understandable, but when the kind of the business model is we're going to be bad, just be bad, and then once in a generation, that's harder to support.
But we've seen cases where teams were bad and people still showed up. The Cubs showed up, but I mean, when you have kind of by active decree going out there saying, look, we are not going to pursue high dollar free agents to make our team better. We are trying to keep the payroll down and we are going to build, and it's going to be a couple years. People are turned off. And I'm not going to go spend my money until you're actually good. Now, if you're constantly trying and you're showing me you're trying, I'm willing to go support that. But people aren't going to go and support teams that aren't trying, that aren't necessarily trying. I mean, look at the 76ers. When they were actively, quote, tanking, they were one of the worst draws in the league. Why? Because people aren't going to go spend their money to go watch a team that is actively trying to stink to get better down the road. And I think that is that to me, that's an issue for all sports. But certainly if you're Major League Baseball, you need to address that. And I've said it a number of times, that is my worry, that's not going to get addressed. And so you can raise the CBT ceiling all you want. You can raise that all you want. That affects nobody. It really affects nobody. The Yankees are still going to spend. It just gives them more money to spend, and the Marlins and the Orioles, and they're still not going to. So that hasn't solved anything. You're just allowing the teams that were already spending money to spend more, and that's pretty much all that's going to happen. So we'll see. Negotiations continuing. I'm not hopeful that we're going to get anywhere anytime soon. We got plenty to get to. 912-342-7184. Love to hear from you on Twitter as well, at Pigskin Radio. We're streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com as well, and on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Thursday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, Combine kicking off. I know a lot of talk about quarterbacks and hands and all of that, BJ, but you also had a number of guys doing the interviews there. Evan Neal, who was looking good for an offensive lineman. Ekwonu, those are probably, if you read between the lines, that's the decision the Jaguars are going to make. Would that be fair? I mean, I know they'll say, hey, we talked with Aiden Hutchinson and Thibodeau, but I mean, you have to think it's those two gentlemen on the offensive line that are going to come down to the ultimate choice there.
I think that's the right call. And look, the I guess consensus on the edge rushers from a lot of the draft people that I read say that maybe on an overall big board, maybe you go a spot or two higher. But I think these guys were all A prospects, and Jacksonville, you have to get better along the front five. You have to help Trevor Lawrence, and that's going to be a multi-pick thing. I mean, it's not like you just draft an offensive tackle and your offense is going to be great, but if you kind of read between the lines, some people are speculating maybe Jacksonville not going to re-sign Cam Robinson. If you do that, you're going to need a left tackle, whether it's Neal or Ekwonu. But I think both these guys are really good. I mean, Evan Neal, we've talked about his resume at Alabama, played every position, right? Played center, played guard. You're talking about a guy that came in, started as a true freshman. Apparently is down a little bit weight wise. I think like 335.
Oh, yeah,
or was it like?
Yeah.
And we've heard from Drew DeArmond, countless analysts that have said this guy's athletic. This guy, I mean, you've seen. I think he has some viral videos of doing the box jumps or whatever. I mean, he's a star. And then Akeem Ekwonu is awesome. If you watched ACC football, and I'm not a huge tape guy, I don't know how to process it like a lot of people, but you can just see Ekwonu just dominate. I mean, great at getting downfield and blocking. I mean, just a punishing blocker. I think all the talk about him going number one overall is legitimate, is absolutely legitimate, and I can see it. I think if you're Jacksonville, you would be thrilled with Neal or Ekwonu. I would be surprised, Kevin, if it's an edge rusher. Now, as you have long said, how much of this is real? How much of this is the smoke screen? How much of this is we're trying to move up, move back? I'm not talking about with Jacksonville moving, but teams just saying what they're interested in, who they're interested in, leaking opinions on players. It's really hard to get especially we're still over a month out from the draft. It's hard to say, I know for a fact this is going to happen. But I think reading all the reports, I think looking at the prospect resumes, I think it would really make sense to go Neal or Ekwonu at number one overall for the Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I look at just one of those things where it makes too much sense. Like, have we seen teams do things that have been head scratchers with the number one overall pick? Of course we have. But sometimes, BJ, we said it, it's almost like you have too much time to think about it and you talk yourself out of it, right? I mean, you have decisions like that all the time where you're like, you're maybe going to look at a car. You're like, do you like the red one or the green one? I like the red one. But that green one's starting to look pretty good. Maybe I do like the green one. Then you get the green one, you're like, oh, I should have got the red one. Like, a lot of times you just overthink it. Like, your gut tells you, the tape tells you, like, Evan Neal should be the guy. And again, I know Jacksonville, Doug Peterson's not going, BJ, Kevin, what do you guys think? But as you said, the measurables are there. The tape is there. He played at one of the best programs in college football and started from the moment he showed up there and dominated. Like, what else are you looking for? Are you going to go off of him because the 3-cone drill was a little slower than I thought? I mean, you know what I mean?
I think he's the betting favorite. I think if you look at the odds,
I think, what are you talking yourself out of at this point if you're Jacksonville?
Well, I think you're just looking at all the possible top targets. I mean, it is interesting though how the draft ebbs and flows because the mock drafts, I should say. When the first mock drafts came out, it was Thibodeau is going to be the guy. Number one overall. We've been hearing that for years, right? He's going to be the guy. And then when kind of the next wave of mocks came out, it was Aiden Hutchinson. Oh man, look at what he did against Ohio State. Aiden Hutchinson's going to be the number one overall pick. And then kind of in recent weeks, it's going to be Evan Neal. Evan Neal is going to be the guy. You got to protect Trevor Lawrence. And then there've been a couple of, I think Mel Kiper's mock draft, Akeem Ekwonu going to be the number one guy. So you don't know what the next wave is gonna predict. I think it's going to be Neal or Ekwonu. Now, to your point, I don't think there's going to be anything at the combine where you go, oh, a 5-1-3 instead of a 5-1-2. I mean, I think you know who the top guys are. I think you're weighing your options. And here's what's interesting. Jacksonville may already know. I mean, all of this speculation, all of this projection may be just kind of talking around it. I mean, the Jaguars may already know and may already know, with great conviction who their number one guy is going to be. We'll have to wait and see. I don't really know how that works internally. If you narrow it down to a couple of guys, or if you have your guy, I don't know. I don't know how that works. But I do think the combine, if you're Jacksonville, might be more interesting to look at kind of what you could do second, third round. Because I think Jacksonville has 5 of the top 105 picks. You're going to have the first pick in the second round, which is basically a first round pick, 33 overall. I mean, is there a chance, Kevin, to get not only a starter, but an impact starter if you get Neal or Ekwonu at number 1? Is there, I don't know. I mean, could one of the receivers fall to 33? Could you take a tight end at 33? Could an edge rusher be there at 33? A defensive tackle at 33? I mean, I think there's going to be good talent there.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what the Jags do at the top. I'm going all the offense for Jacksonville. I'm helping out Trevor Lawrence as best I can in this draft. So at the top of the second round, BJ, as deep as people say it could be, I might be looking at a wide receiver at the top of the second round and saying, I'm going to give or a tight end and say, I'm going to give my guys some weapons. I'm going to give him some weapons. I've protected him with the tackle. People have said this tackle and guard class is very deep. I may go guard, even to say, look, give me as many guys to keep Trevor Lawrence standing upright as possible. Cam and I were talking about this yesterday. It's as old as football, but good offensive line and good defensive line will do what? It'll make everybody else better. If I give Trevor Lawrence 4 or 5 seconds to throw the ball, probably going to be pretty good, right? Because defensive line's very good. Guys don't have to cover as long. All of a sudden, your secondary looks all world. So if I'm Jacksonville, I'm taking care of Trevor Lawrence. Probably going to do that with the first pick. And then at 33, I'm looking to give him a weapon. Whether it's a tight end,
receiver,
whether it's a receiver, give him somebody to get the ball to. And maybe you can address some of this in free agency, but it'd also be nice. You gave him Etienne, and we'll see how he comes back from his injury. It'd also be nice to give him a young kind of receiver to kind of pair him with as, hey, we went out and got some veterans. This is a guy we brought in the draft just for you, so you guys can grow together.
And you have Laviska Shenault, DJ Shark is a free agent. I believe Marvin Jones is a free agent. Now, just because somebody's a free agent doesn't mean they're not coming back, but I think there's the chance that you have some attrition at the wide receiver position. I think tight end has been a position. I mean, you brought in Tim Tebow. I mean, tight end's been a position of need for years, I think. Maybe a Jalen Weidermeyer, maybe an Isaiah Likely in the second round. Could a George Pickens, Kevin, maybe be there at 33? I mean, could now Treylon Burks, Drake London, Jamison Williams? I mean, if one of those guys were to fall to 33, that would be a home run. A David Bell out of Purdue. But I'm with you. I think if you're looking at it, it's impossible to plan for the second round because if the top or number 2 or 3 edge rusher or defensive tackle on your board falls to 33, that's where you go. But in theory, I think it would make a lot of sense to go offensive tackle 1, wide receiver 2, and then kind of work from there.
And again, if I'm Jacksonville, address some guys on defense that can play. I think defensively at times they weren't terrible. Offensively, you were terrible a lot. You hate to say you want to do this, but I may spend like 80% of my picks on the offense. Make sure that if Trevor Lawrence is going to be a bust, and I've said this, it's not going to be because he didn't have guys around him, right? Who was it I always make fun of for the Jags? They brought in
Blaine
Gabbert. You bring him in game 3, and you're like, go get him, Blaine. And you're like, Blaine Gabbert's a bust. And I'm like, do you see who he's throwing to? Like, do you see who he has out there? Like, none of these guys are even close to sniffing a Pro Bowl. None of these guys would be close to be sniffing a Pro Bowl alternate status. Like, how are you expecting him to succeed when he has nobody really to get the ball to that's going to make big time plays consistently? And I think if you're Jags, you made a number 1 pick in Trevor Lawrence, don't have him bust because you didn't give him anything to work with. Have him bust because he wasn't good enough, not because he didn't have guys to get the football to. If I'm Jacksonville, That is my strategy. We've got more to come here. 3 and Out Combine underway. A bunch of Georgia players going to be running through Indianapolis over the next couple of days. We'll get to that next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here on this Thursday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, glad you are with us. A lot coming up in hour number 2. We'll hear from Lawton Swan, Clemson Sports Talk, as the Tigers are underway. We'll look at the ACC. Could they be improved as a league here in 2022? So looking ahead to that, Mike Bratton, Matt Michelle going to join us in the final hour of the program. But the Combine is underway. 14 Georgia Bulldogs going to run through there, some quite literally, in Indianapolis. BJ, how many guys do you think are going to go in that first round? I know we asked some folks leading up to the Combine of how many guys do you think realistically could go in the draft. I think Logan Booker said 4, maybe a 5th could sneak in there depending on how the draft shapes out, but could be a huge day for Georgia on that opening round.
Oh, it's going to be a showcase, and the Dogs doing big things in Indy. Obviously, 14 at the Combine, winning a national championship in Indianapolis as well. But I think, and Logan Booker had a good breakdown of it yesterday from 960 The Ref in Athens. But I think when you talk about first-round locks, and you say that, the best you can. I mean, the draft, you never know anything with the draft. But I think Nakobe Dean is a lock to go in the first round. I think Travon Walker is a lock to go in the first round. I think those two guys, if you look at some of the locks, whatever, probably top half of the first round, top 15, maybe even top 10 type picks. I know there's been some talk in the other direction. I think Jordan Davis is going to go in the first round. If you run a 3-4 defense, I've seen some projections that say he'd be a great fit for the Chargers. If you run a 3-4 defense and you need a nose guard, a nose tackle, who could possibly be better than Jordan Davis? I think Jordan Davis is going to go in the first round. Devontae Wyatt looks like he's got a good chance. And again, you never know. I mean, it's so hard to project kind of after the top 10 and the mock drafts, as we talked about in the opening segment or the last segment, kind of change and some of the storylines change. But it looks like Devontae Wyatt, and understandably, is going to be a first-round pick. And then that would be what? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then Lewis Seen has been talked about as kind of a top 40, top 50 type pick. It would not surprise me if Lewis Seen is really good safety, is in the back end of the first round. And I think maybe the X factor is George Pickens, because when Pickens is healthy, I mean, you're talking about a wide receiver 1. And what are the expectations for his 40-yard dash time? I think we all agree that maybe that shouldn't be the factor that it is. Oh my God, you run a 4.47 compared to a 4.49. But if George Pickens comes out and has one of those explosive headline grabbing 40-yard dash times, do I think it's unfathomable, unreasonable to project him as a first round guy? No, I think he's one of those top receivers. Now, are all of those guys probably going to go in the first round? I don't know, because there are only so many slots. But to go back to your original point, Georgia's well represented, just an astonishing 14 guys at the Combine. And I think you're going to see multiple, clearly, guys go in the first round.
Who's the guy you think could fluctuate in depending on how it goes? I mean, I know there's some guys on the bubble could go either way. Who's the guy that you think
getting into the first round?
Yeah, maybe at the end of the first round, it could slide into the second round.
I just think Pickens. I think it's hard. We're talking about the injured wide receivers, right? Where you have Pickens, you have Mechie.
There's quite a few of them.
Yeah, you have Ross, you have Jamison Williams. Even, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the wide receivers have dealt with injuries, and it's really hard to get a sense for kind of what the consensus is, because I know you said this before in the draft. We may look at mock drafts and say, 8 out of the 9 mock drafts have this guy going in the top 20. Well, it only takes one team.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if the rest of the teams say, no, that's a second or third round guy, but one team says that's a first round wide receiver, or that's a first round lineman, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
So all this talk about a consensus, when it comes to the draft, a consensus kind of doesn't matter. It's kind of irrelevant. It's what one team wants. I think Darion Kendrick's another interesting guy. I know Ben was talking about him yesterday. Really talented. Had 2 interceptions in the Orange Bowl against Michigan. He's a guy that I've seen a lot. Second round, really talented, big, physical. Could he move into the first round? Maybe. Wouldn't stun me. But again, it's hard to get a feel for those projections. I think probably top 50 makes sense. You're going to see a lot of guys go in the top 50, certainly the top 100. I mean, Kevin, I'll give you a guy that I'm not quite sure why some of the projections aren't higher, and that's Jamari Sawyer, the offensive lineman. Did a great job this past season against some of the top edge rushers in the country. He and Warren McClendon did an excellent job, of course, against Michigan. I think you're talking about a guy that can play tackle, a guy that can play guard. That versatility matters a lot in the National Football League. Maybe he's a second round guy, but it's hard to project. It's after you get past the top 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, every year, right? We see picks where guys who were locked first round selections fall to the second round. Guys who were second or third round projections go in the first round. But I do know this big time showcase for the Georgia Bulldogs, and I think that helps with recruiting.
Yeah, just a little bit. You're going to hear that a lot on that Thursday, Friday of the draft of out of the University of Georgia, so-and-so. I think you're going to hear that a lot. And again, you win the national championship. That's what kind of goes along with it at the same time. And I mean, people were talking when Georgia was making their run, BJ, that over the course of this kind of cycle, you could have 18 guys off of that team that started potentially making it to the National Football League when it's all said and done.
It's very similar to, you think about, the other modern kind of powerhouses. Yeah. You think about Alabama, you think about Ohio State, you think about Miami back in the day, and Florida State, and Clemson. I mean, especially
I think Miami will never kind of be matched because there's 16 first round draft picks out there. But
early 2000s Miami, that was the impossible standard. But in terms of, you look at the roster and you go up first round pick, second round pick, that guy. I mean, you look at some of the mock drafts for next year, right? And they are out, right? The mock draft, Nolan Smith's being talked about as a high. I mean, everybody on that Georgia defense, especially. And then you think about the depth. I mean, that's what's amazing about it too, is you have guys who maybe weren't even multi-year starters who are going to be drafted, maybe even highly drafted despite not being multi-year starters. So it used to be, go to a program like Georgia, start for 2 or 3 years. That's your audition for the NFL, and you're going to be in the league. I mean, now you can be a rotational guy, and it's funny when you talk about Georgia draft picks. Jermaine Johnson's going to be a first round pick, and he was at Georgia, transferred to Florida State, and was a part of that great depth there for Georgia defensively. I've seen some mock drafts that have Jermaine Johnson going in the top 10. Had a great Senior Bowl. Obviously, they're in Mobile, so Georgia's going to be incredibly well represented. But just think about this: why did Georgia win the national title? Well, 14 guys, the most of anybody, 14 guys at the NFL Combine. That helps, and again, that gets the attention of recruits.
Yeah, we're going to be talked about an awful lot leading up to the draft, and certainly on draft day. We've got more to come here. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett. Next hour, Lawton Swan going to join us. We're talking some Clemson football with him as their spring practice back underway, but still basketball going on the high school level, BJ, as we've got the Final Fours set around the state and still have some local teams set to make it to a state championship game if they can win coming up later this week. So
I was going to say Southeast Georgia well represented, the Low Country well represented, Savannah well represented. What wasn't it? All of the boys teams from Region 3, 3A advanced to the Elite Eight, which is just remarkable when you think about the depth and the balance and the overall talent of high school basketball. And I'm looking at it, I believe, Beach and Windsor Forest, right? In 3A. Theoretically, if Beach were to beat Cross Creek and Windsor Forest beats Thompson, it would be what Beach and Windsor Forest for the state championship, right? Which would kind of be a region championship or a region game for a state championship. And then what you have Woodville Tompkins, 2A. You have the Pierce girls versus Greater Atlanta Christian. So a number of teams obviously competing for state championships, and we wish them the absolute best. Awesome to see.
Yeah, Woodville Tompkins against Ben's Butler Bulldogs. So I'd throw that out there.
Ben's not here. I mean,
I know he's not here to. I wonder who Ben would take in that game.
But I know you saw some of these teams with PJ and Cam. I mean, these are great teams, and to see these teams advance to the championship round, the Elite Eight, the Final Four, is just a testament to a year's worth of hard work. I mean, it's awesome to see.
Yeah, it's the best region in the state, especially for 3A. But to see, Windsor Forest advance, and then Beach was the fourth place team from that region. They advanced to the Final Four, and they're on the road to Groves all year, was on the road all year. They couldn't play at home all year long and won the region. So their playoff games, all their games was on the road too. So they had a disadvantage the entire time. So to see, all four of those teams make it to the Elite Eight, it's remarkable. That's really hard to do when it's just win or go home. So
absolutely. And Windsor Forest, one of the better players in the state, and Deontay Bass, who's going to Georgetown. So he's leading them towards a potential state championship. So, man, it would be awesome to see that get done. But as you guys said, if Beach and Windsor Forest both win on Friday, they will play for the state championship against one another next Friday in Macon. So that's
awesome
coming up there.
See. How does Bass project the next level, Cam? I know you and PJ had a chance to see him. How does he project as a college player? I know really high expectations.
Nah, he's going to be really good. I hadn't seen much before we got to see him a couple of times play, but I mean, he could pass, he could dribble the ball, he could shoot. I don't see him as a 4. I see him as a 3 or a possible, really tall too, because he can handle the ball. But his decision making and his poise is really good, and he's a good rim protector and a good defender. He could switch 1 through 5. He could guard the 5 because he's like 6'8", 6'9". So it's a lot of talent down here, but I mean, he's the cream of the crop. He's really good.
We've got a lot more to get to coming up next hour. Take 3 right around the corner, and obviously a lot of talk about things happening at the combine with the measurables. I know we all love those, BJ, about whose shoulders are rounded and whose hands aren't big enough to play football in the NFL. We'll get to all that. Also, Lawton Swan, Clemson Sports Talk, will join us as they're back underway for spring practice. And could there be an improved ACC coming up in 2022? We'll get to that coming up in the second hour of the show, but a lot to get to in the final hour as well, with Matt Rochelle and Mike Bratton talking some college football here in early March.
I think Florida State, Clemson spring practice, when you think about the ACC, Georgia Tech's underway, Clemson's underway, and I think Florida State starts this weekend.
Yeah, so we'll get to all that coming up next hour. This is 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com, and on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Thursday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, glad you are with us. Lawton Swan joins us coming up in about 15 minutes on the show. We're talking college football with him. But first, let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. Here it is. There we go. And we bring in Cam Erstry to help us out with Take 3 today. Cam, take it away.
Take 1. It's March. Would you guys take Gonzaga or the field to win the national championship?
Wow.
I'm going to go the field.
Yeah.
I'm going to go the field.
It gets one of those where it's like, just the way my mind works, like it's one of those back to this, like when you take Tiger Woods or the field, like I feel like Tiger would win, but you're saying I can have one guy or I can have like 120 other guys. I mean, I'll take the other guy. Yeah, if I can have one guy or one team or 63 other teams, I'm going to take the 63 teams.
Okay, but this is where it gets tough.
I mean, you got Coach K making his last run.
That's just too storybook. I don't see that happening. But if I have to then pick the team not named Gonzaga to win the national title.
With all the volatility and the top 10 in the last week, wouldn't you just say
I know
so likely that somebody is going to
I know,
screw up?
But I was looking at it. I think Gonzaga has like 75% of the first place votes. Duke has a couple. What you have Auburn still there, Arizona still there, Baylor. Keep an eye on Baylor, the defending champs. But I just think, like Kevin said, this has been a year in college basketball where there's been a lot of volatility and a lot of programs, hot, cold. I mean, even Duke. I mean, Duke in Coach K's last year, they've had stretches where they've been great. They've also had some losses where you're like, wait, what? I mean, Duke lost to Florida State earlier in the year. I mean, Duke lost to lost to Virginia Tech, I think. So you're looking at programs where Kansas, I don't think they're on that level. Kentucky, I think it's hard. But to Kevin's point, if you're saying one team, even if they're the best team versus everybody else, and I'm interested to see kind of where you go with this, Cam, but I'm going to go with the field.
Yeah, it's tough, but I'm going to go with Gonzaga. I think that national championship loss helped them last year, made them realize they have to come into the tournament with a different mindset. And they just lost to St. Mary's. And I know some people are like, well, they just lost to St. Mary's. That's a top 25 team as well. They're 24-6. St. Mary's runs a tight program each and every year. Matthew Dellavedova came out of St. Mary's. But it's a good thing they lost because last year they went to that national championship and they were undefeated. Years before that, they've never lost a conference game. So now you get a taste of what it feels like to lose. And in order to win, you got to lose some. And I will go with
yes.
Them. You have to.
You've been hanging out with BJ too much.
No, I mean, it's true. In order to win, you got to lose some.
In basketball, I actually understand that strategy. Yeah. In football, I don't.
In football, I don't understand. But basketball, yes. And they have 2 guards, 6'5" and 6'7". Nobody in the country has that. And then they have 2 7-foot monsters in Holmgren and Timmy. They got the experience. So I would go Gonzaga. That's who I would pick in my bracket right now.
I mean, I agree. I think Gonzaga's a favorite, but I'm going to take, if you're going to give me 60, you're going to give me 63 teams over one. I'm going to take the
I don't know
63
who
teams.
in the field, but I'm going with the field. Give me Auburn.
There you go.
Give you okay. Take 2.
You think that's going to happen?
No, he knows.
Well, you think the Duke movie with Coach K is going to happen?
I mean, why not?
But yep, it's a perfect.
We just
storybook
had Stetson Bennett. I mean, how many of these stories have we had in the last 12 months?
Well, what about the calls are probably going to be really tight in favor of Duke in the
oh, absolutely.
Welcome to ACC basketball, right? Did I say that out loud? I think I did.
Yeah. Take 2. South Carolina quarterback Spencer Ratler recently told the AP, I feel totally refreshed to be at a new university, a great university like this. I feel very comfortable here. I made a great decision. I'm happy in this position. How good will he be in 2022?
That's a great quote, but again, what else would you expect him to say? Oh, I'm at South Carolina. I messed up, guys. I made a bad move. Like, of course, he wasn't starting at the other one. He's going to start here. How good will he be? I think he'll be. I think he'll be all right. Will he be the best quarterback in the SEC? I don't think so. I think maybe top 5 SEC quarterback. And you look at least South Carolina's strategy. Are they still going to be a run the ball and play defense type team? If that's the case, I mean, he's not going to put up 4,000 yards in a college football season, right?
I think he's going to be really good. Yes, South Carolina's still going to run the football. I think Marshawn Lloyd. I mean, you have some really good running backs. Kevin Harris moving on to the NFL, but I think South Carolina is going to be more balanced offensively, and I think you're going to see Austin Stogner, who came in as a tight end transfer from Oklahoma with Ratler. be productive there. But listen, Spencer Rattler, I think people kind of quickly forgot about him. I mean, his debut season at Oklahoma was really good, and it's not like he was horrible when they turned to Caleb Williams. I mean, still very productive, still very proficient. Now, defenses probably a little different in the SEC than what you see in the Big 12, but I think he's going to be really good, and I'm excited to see what he does. I am. Now, to your point, Kevin, is he the best quarterback in the SEC? No. Bryce Young, I mean, just set all kind of records, won the Heisman Trophy. I mean, he's back. Bryce Young is Bryce Young. I think Hendon Hooker and Stetson Bennett both finished along with Bryce Young. They were 3 of the top 5 finishers in passer rating in the entire country. I think the SEC probably feels like they're going to be pretty good overall at the quarterback position. But do I think Spencer Rattler is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league? Yes. I'm excited to watch him.
So when I said top 5, was that off?
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think he will be there. Yeah. Now, in terms of, I know you said maybe he doesn't throw for 3,000.
I mean, at least I didn't say top 14, right?
Right. He's gonna. I mean, he's gonna throw for a lot of yards. They're gonna throw the football. They have playmakers. They have the potential to be very productive offensively. And I'll tell you this: if you're Georgia, I know a lot of people have kind of chalked it up. Oh, Georgia's schedule super easy in 2022. I mean, South Carolina has given you trouble in the past. Now you have Spencer Rattler on that roster. This is a program with a lot of momentum. Won their bowl game. I think he's going to be really good. I think it's a fascinating storyline to watch in the SEC. What South Carolina can do in year 2 of the Shane Beamer era.
Spencer Rattler went to South Carolina to do one thing, and that's to bolster his NFL draft stock. He didn't go there because South Carolina looks like a cool school. He wanted to play quarterback in the SEC. I think he'll end up being the second best quarterback.
Or he just wanted to play, period.
Play, period. Absolutely. I think he'll end up being the second best quarterback in the SEC at the end of the year. I put Bryce Young ahead of him, and then he's ahead of everybody else. If you look at their schedule, they could easily go 6-6, 7-5, or 8-4. I think 8-4 is their ceiling. 6-6 is their floor. But I mean, he's still talented. He's still really good. It's not like he left out of Oklahoma and he was just absolutely terrible. It's just the guy behind you is really good who could possibly be top 10, pick in the NFL draft. So do I think he will? I think he'll be really good this year. I think he's going to put up maybe 3,000, 4,000 yards. They're going to switch up their offense a little bit and try to become more dynamic. But they get a lot of those big games at home. They get Georgia at home. They get Texas A&M at home. They get Tennessee at home. The only big road game they have this year is at Clemson and at Kentucky. So I think he's going to do pretty good. Take 3. Will the MLB baseball season be played in April? Will it start in April?
Week or so ago, I would have said, I think so. Now I don't know, because I will say no. And unfortunately, because I feel like it leaked out, and those things leak out on purpose. The owners would be willing to miss a month of the season. You've seen players reiterate that in their kind of social media posts. Jason Hayward saying, look, the owners don't care if we miss April. It's a debt month for them. They start making money in May, June, July, August, and into the postseason. So they don't care. Not that they care about the fans or anything, but they don't care if they missed April. So because of that, I feel like we're going to get more of what we got today, where you had 2 negotiators meeting, no principals there, and the tone is the same. And BJ, you kind of talked about that as well. I think the owners will do everything they can to miss a month of the season, make all their profits in May, June, July, August, September, October, that they were going to make anyway. Not try to not pay the players for the month that the players missed, because by the way, the owners locked them out. And if you say, well, what if the players don't bite? Well, the next move by the owners would be, in a couple of weeks, if there's no deal, well, we've moved to just play under the rules of last year. The lockout is over. We'll see you on May the 1st. And then it's up to the players to say, okay, we'll play or we strike. And if they strike, well, then the shift goes over to the players' side, who are now holding up the proceedings. So I think that is a card the owners could play in this thing. But it seems pretty abundant that both sides understand that the owners don't give 2 rips about the month of April right now in these negotiations, and are willing to miss it. And so if they're willing to miss it already, then I don't believe we're going to be playing until May.
I want to say yes, but
I would love to say yes, but I just don't think so.
Everything we've talked about and kind of what you've said makes it hard to say yes, because I agree with you. When it came out that the owners are willing to miss a month, that's concerning. That's troubling. And you don't know kind of how that plays into the posturing or kind of the leverage, but that wouldn't be leaked out if there wasn't some semblance of accuracy there, right? So the owners are willing to miss a month plus. Well, a month plus goes from the end of March to the beginning of May. And and by that question, I'm assuming we're talking about like real regular season baseball. Haven't we seen, Kevin, that essentially you need 3-4 weeks of spring training? That's been mentioned as kind of the status quo, as kind of the standard. So I think we all agree this week is a wash. I don't know what's changing next week. So let's say the pressure mounts, fans kind of make their voices heard, players continue to go after the owners on social media, ramp the pressure up, maybe mid-March. Well, mid-March, if you get serious, maybe that means March, the week of March 20th, you start to have something, and then you have 4 weeks of spring training. So it's going to be close. I guess just to be consistent with my own stance, I'm going to say no. But I mean, Kevin, at some point, don't the owners, Cam, at some point, don't the owners have to look and go, we're hurting the game. We have to give a little bit back. So I want to say yes, but I'm going to say no, man.
Well, I mean, the owners aren't us. The owners they're billionaires. They don't care about if they're hurting the game or not, as long as their pockets are not being hurt.
But they should. I mean,
But they should.
And again, I guess you could say I live in. I mean, they should. If you own a team, you should want it to be successful. You should want there to be games and people enjoying your product. I mean,
absolutely. I 100% agree. But we know money makes the world go around. And these guys, they care about what's in their pocket, not what's the product being pushed on the field. I mean, it's just a bad relationship that I don't think it's going to be resolved anytime soon, especially in April. They've came out pretty much in the month of March, kind of early March, and said, we're willing to miss out on money for a whole entire month just to get our way or, find out a solution. I don't think it's going to happen in April. I just don't see it happening. I don't think they're going to get anything together. That's pretty quick. Unless something comes out within the next week or two, I don't think them play.
I think you're right. I think what we're looking at is, in order for this to happen with kind of the timeline, is it needs to be addressed in terms of some sort of compromise in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I mean, is that what
if
we're
you
looking
stall
at?
it out to a month, nothing's gonna happen if you stall it out to a month.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think by doing what they did earlier this week, as I said yesterday, you've added more to the negotiation table of, are you going to pay us for the games we didn't play? Because you're the ones who kept us out, not the other way around. I mean, that's the way I would spin it. You have the legal counsel there for Major League Baseball when asked if they understood that Major League Baseball said games missed, you're not getting paid for. He said, quote, that is their position, meaning, no, you're paying us.
Yeah.
So that's another thing you're going to have to argue. I mean, look how long it took him to decide on 60 games and how much they were going to get paid when we had COVID. And that's when hardly anybody was playing sports and everybody's saying baseball. You idiots, you're missing out on a great opportunity. And they still couldn't figure that out without a big squabble. So, I don't have a lot of optimism right now because I feel like the owners don't care about the month of April in this negotiation. Like, are we going to have baseball in April next year if there's a CBA? Of course. But in the short term, if they feel like April is a loser, who cares? We were going to lose money anyway. Let's get back into money-making months in May, June, July, and August. And I feel if that's how you're negotiating, there's no rush by the owners to get back out there. And maybe there are from some, but from a lot of what I understand behind the scenes, this whole process can be disrupted by as few as 8 owners. So if you have, what would that be? So 22 owners can think one way and 8 another, and they can hold up the whole process. And apparently you have some small market owners who are holding up the process. Because obviously, if I'm the New York Yankees and I run the Yankee empire, I can make money in season, out of season, any season. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm the Yankees. I have a brand. I'm one of the biggest names going. Let's get back out there and start making cash. But apparently, you have some small market owners that don't feel the same way, and they kind of gum up the works.
As Cam said,
bit.
I mean, they're not gonna.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate for everybody involved. That's Take 3. We do it each day. At this time, we'll come back. Lawton Swan will join us, Clemson Sports Talk, and we're talking spring practice with him next here on 3 and Out. Good to have you here on this Thursday. Spring practices all across the South here in college football. Clemson cranking back underway. And joining us here from Clemson Sports Talk, good friend of the show, Lawton Swan joins us. Lawton, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. How about y'all?
Man, we are doing good. Good to have football back in the news. Clemson back at it. And we were talking kind of before the show. Clemson kind of interesting because I think if you were to just go around and ask people about Clemson last year, you'd be like, oh, yeah, they just had a down year, weren't very good, because they saw the loss to Georgia, saw some close wins. But at the end of the day, it was a 10-win football team despite all their issues. What's kind of the temperature of the room, so to speak, now that spring practice is starting once again?
Yeah, I think, it's one of those things where Clemson had kind of become so accustomed, right, to being at the top of college football. It was a strange season. And, if you kind of look back at it, outside of Alabama beating Georgia, it was Clemson in that opener. It wasn't a great ball game, but they stood toe-to-toe with the Bulldogs. But after that, 7-8 sacks on DJ Uyunglele in that ball game. He never quite looked like the player people had hoped he would be. And I think you saw that throughout the year during Clemson's season. They survived a lot of games. I mean, they survived Georgia Tech. And so Dabo Swinney said yesterday, they're battle tested. And I think that's kind of what you feel looking at this group now is that, they've been through the grind of a struggling season. They finished with 10 wins, as you mentioned. They watched Georgia, one of their rivals, go on to win the national title. And I think they recognize that, hey, man, they might have left something on the table there in Charlotte to open the season. I know they certainly feel that way with the matchup in Raleigh. And you don't have to be perfect. We know that to get into the college football playoff. You don't have to be undefeated. But I think Clemson really feels like they missed a couple of opportunities, and they'll certainly hope to turn that around this year.
Lawton, here in the spring, what's going on at the quarterback position? I know a couple of talented guys there clearly, but is there a clear starter? What's going on at quarterback?
Yeah, I think at this point it is still DJ's job to lose, obviously. I mean, he would have to play, I think, pretty poorly to pass the torch to Cade Klubnik this early in his career, simply because of the fact that I think Clemson, I don't think that's in their plan of action, if you will, or the recipe that they would like to go through. I think they would like to see DJ play more like he did as a freshman, and then ultimately be able to protect Cade for a year and then give him an opportunity, over the next season or whenever he does indeed take over. I mean, if Cade Klubnik has to be the guy early on for Clemson, that's going to be, I think, a tougher pill to swallow than it was when you had Trevor Lawrence come in for Kelly Bryant 4 games into the season, his freshman year, because I think Cade's still got to put on some weight, still got to put on some muscle mass, and he's got months to do that. But if you look at those guys out there, yesterday, and again, the good news is one of DJ's goals has been to lose weight, guys. He's trying to drop down. I think he's around 220, 225, and I think that's a big move for him to increase his mobility, maybe help him with his confidence in the pocket, just being a step faster. But, yeah, if this thing has to go to Cade Klubnik early, I don't think that the season per se goes the way Clemson wants, because I think that's just going to be a lot, even though Cade's already come in and by all indications really taking a leadership role. But that's what you want to see from a young guy. I mean, that's really what you want to see. But I don't think you necessarily want or desire to see him out of the gates for Clemson this year.
Lawton Swan joining us here on 3 and Out. Lawton, on the defensive side of the football, what's the expected transition away from Brent Venables kind of looking like? Do they expect to have a little bit of regrouping on that side of the ball? Do they expect, hey, there's plenty of talent, shouldn't be any drop-off? What's kind of the expectation now that you lose longtime defensive coordinator Brent Venables?
Not only that, but, Wes Goodwin's an unknown. And that's the thing that I think probably shocked the most people about the hire. Like, most of the time, if you're one of the top teams in college football and you lose a coordinator of the ilk of a Brent Venables, the next name up is a big name that you've heard of. Instead, it's a guy in Wes Goodwin who was a baseball assistant at Mississippi State many moons ago, worked his way up under Sylvester Croom and Ellis Johnson, the defensive coordinator there. Been at Clemson. He's been with the Arizona Cardinals. Bruce Arians notably moved his secretary out and moved Wes Goodwin into the room next door because he was just doing such a good job. He's such a great mind. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, there's a lot to be determined on that front. I did like, though, after Clemson gave up, 13 points, I think, in the bowl game, and they asked Wes Goodwin how he thought his first start or his first game coaching went. He said, well, we gave up 13 points, so it wasn't as expected. So, he really wants to shut people out. So I like that. But, one of the things that they talked about yesterday that I think is interesting is that Trenton Simpson, who is an incredibly versatile linebacker who was playing that nickel hybrid spot for Clemson, they're going to move him to the weak side linebacker position. That's going to allow a sophomore, Barrett Carter, who was a 4-star, 5-star kid, depending on where you look, out of the state of Georgia, to move into that nickel hybrid. But that puts you two very quick, very versatile linebackers out there. And as you guys know, in this era where the spread game, everybody's spread out wide, you've got all kind of matchups that coaches try to take advantage of on the offensive side of the football. I think for Clemson, what that's going to give them is some versatility that a lot of teams don't have. And so I think that's a big move. I think it's probably a wise move, too, because I think Trenton Simpson's future probably lies at the weak side linebacker spot. But for the versatility under Wes Goodwin, guys, I think that's going to be great. That'll allow probably Vontae Bentley to take over the middle linebacker spot for James Skalski. And I think they're going to play downhill, and I think they're going to come after you and mix coverages because of the versatility that they'll have with Barrett Carter and Trenton Simpson in at linebacker at the same time.
You think about Clemson's consistency over the years. I mean, just remarkable at the top of college football. Venables moves on, Tony Elliott as well. How does Dabo Swinney kind of maintain the messaging, the status quo with both coordinators now head coaches, obviously?
Yeah, that's the big thing. Like, Swinney has had very consistent coaching staff, not a lot of turnover, not a lot of change. That meant recruiting, didn't get changed all that much. Relationships weren't things that had to be reestablished. And you also lose longtime offensive line coach Robbie Caldwell and Thomas Austin coming in to take that role at Clemson. So, I mean, there has been some maneuvering on that front. I think they'll do fine. One, because I think that the continuity of the staff still continues, because I think there's a lot of shared responsibility there. Brandon Streeter, he had a chance in the, going back, the Ohio State game, I guess, a year ago, where Tony Elliott had COVID-19, all the COVID years now running together. And so he did get to call that game, and then obviously he called the bowl game against Iowa State. But, I think they feel pretty good about that because of the relationship that those guys had and the trust that they had, in the shared responsibility of game plan and things of that nature. But, yeah, I mean, it is going to be an adjustment because it just has kind of been, you look at Nick Saban, it probably is a bigger testimony of how great he's been. The fact that he has so much staff turnover, and yet there they are at the top of the recruiting rankings. There they are at the top of the college football rankings every year. And so this is a bit of an adjustment for Clemson. The other thing, too, Todd Bates, defensive line coach, left to go to join Brent Venables at Oklahoma. And they brought in Nick Eason, who was at Auburn, and obviously Nick, the former Clemson Tiger. So, there's still some other staff turnover that's taking place. But all in all, I think Coach Swinney will tell you, that they're in a really good spot and feel comfortable with the staff that they've got heading into the season.
Lawton Swan joining us here on 3 and Out. Lawton, how do you view kind of the rest of the Atlantic here? I know Florida State's trying to make strides. NC State's kind of been the early offseason darlings here with a number of people coming back. Of course, Wake Forest returns a lot of folks. They went to the ACC championship game this year. Is the ACC Atlantic kind of getting better? Because I think for a while it was kind of viewed like people had viewed the SEC East, where you had Georgia and Florida at the top and everybody else was playing catch-up. Over in the Atlantic, maybe even a little worse, we had Clemson and everybody else was playing catch-up.
Yeah, you could probably say that about the entire league, right? It kind of felt like Clemson and everybody else just in the entire conference. But, yeah, I think maybe a little bit. NC State, to me, is still interesting. They got to come to Clemson this year, which, that'll be a game. If you want to look at the downfall of good programs through the years, the thing that trips them up is overlooking an opponent, right? I mean, how many times have you seen somebody go in and just, we weren't ready for that one? Clemson will be locked in on it. They already don't like NC State and Dave Duren from the fan perspective. I can't imagine that the players will be overlooking them either after the loss a year ago. But, yeah, I think to a degree, I mean, across the country, I feel like the gap is sort of narrowing a bit. And I don't know if that's because of the COVID-19 years and guys being able to return and the balancing of rosters, et cetera, that's kind of had to take place. But in general, last year, I think more than any was a year where going into the season, most people said, oh, well, it's going to be Alabama, it's going to be Clemson, it's going to be Ohio State, it's going to be Oklahoma. And then at the end of the year, you're looking around and going, that didn't exactly play out like we expected. So, whether or not last year was an anomaly or not from the norm of what we've seen during the college football playoff era with Clemson and Alabama and others, we'll find out as we move on down the road. But, yeah, I think in the Atlantic Coast Conference, it does feel like people are at least making some strides on Clemson. And I think the team to keep your eyeball on out of the Coastal Division eventually will be Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes. And the staff he's put together, certainly if they can start recruiting that area of South Florida the way they used to, they're probably the team out of all the teams in the league, guys, that if you look at their tenure in the Atlantic Coast Conference, you just scratch your head at how they haven't been better and how they haven't, picked up an Atlantic Coast Conference championship.
Lawton Swan, Clemson Sports Talk, our guest here on 3 and Out. Lawton, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Fellas, keep crushing it. Always appreciate you.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. Lawton Swan joining us here on 3 and Out. And as he said, they're interesting to watch the quarterback dynamic at Clemson. DJU was preseason Heisman Trophy contender, got the big NIL deal. One of the, I think, 3 or 4 guys that got really huge national NIL deals. I think he was in the college football town, Dr. Pepper commercials and things of that nature. But the season didn't kind of live up to what people were hoping there in Clemson. Just, I think, 9 touchdowns on the year. As Lawton said, Clemson kind of survived a lot of games, didn't really go out and dominate a lot of those games. And certainly when you got a big 5-star breathing down your neck now, a little different dynamic there for the Tigers.
Yeah. Big season, big spring for DJ Uiagalelei, and, talented guy for whatever reason last year, just wasn't able to consistently produce. But I think, yes, if you look at Clemson and what do they need to do to get back to that college football playoff level this fall, defensively, they were still elite last year. I think defensively going to be good again this year, but you need a little more productivity from that quarterback position, certainly.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out. We'll take a look at the ACC. Could it be better? BJ and I will discuss next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Yeah, it's three. It's 3 and out. Kevin and BJ here with you. Cam Bursary running the controls for us. ACC football. BJ, could it be better than it was a season ago? Good point. Christian Gokel. Could not be much worse, but especially in the Atlantic, where Clemson was there and has ruled the roost for so long. Wake Forest went to the ACC championship game. They're expected, at least offensively, to not miss a beat here in 2022. A lot of preseason love for my guy, Dave Dorn, at NC State. I think when they told him he was like preseason expected.
As soon as we went to break, I knew this was going to come back.
But Dave and I are in a good relationship. We have a good relationship. Whenever I need a good quote, Dave's there for me. I don't have one for today, though. But if he did, it would probably sound something like this.
Just so
and
folks
how do you
know,
argue with that?
This is all you.
How do you argue with that? How is it all me?
Anyway, the ACC is going to be good this year. I really think so.
No, it will be.
What?
No, I said it will be.
Oh, I thought you were mocking. I mean, Christian's already mocking the ACC
No,
from
really,
afar.
it couldn't be much worse than it was, probably at least in the COVID year.
Listen, Clemson, most preseason polls that are out, and you got a good look at it there from Lawton, have Clemson in the top 5, and I think that's fair. I mean, I think rightfully so. When you bring back the defense they have, the way they've recruited, I do think you expect a little more offensive production. Maybe if you want to say top 6 or 7 at worst, but Clemson is a legitimate top 10 team, and you rightfully mentioned it. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, you were terrible last year." That just goes to show how dominant of a program you were. You won 10 games, and the whole college football landscape kind of our fan base is kind of forgetting about you. It's remarkable how good Clemson has become, and I think they're going to be really good. I think when you look at the ACC outside of Clemson, NC State's got a good team and a balanced roster coming back. Their quarterback, Devin Leary, is really good. Jakeem Harris, a local product, all ACC type defensive back, a ton of production back along the front 7. Playmakers at running back and wide receiver, really good along the offensive line, even with the loss of Akeem Ekwonu. Defensive line going to be really good. And this is a team that knows it can play with Clemson. Beat Clemson last year. And I think that's an advantage. Now, Lawton said that game's in the upstate, but still, when you beat a team, I think that gives you kind of a psychological balance when you come in and play them that, hey, this isn't a game that we think we can win. This is a game we know we can win. And then staying there in the ACC Atlantic, Wake Forest was in the top 10 last year. Like, I know a lot of people, it's easy to overlook Wake Forest, not a big school, not a traditional power. I think they're going to be really good. Sam Hartman's back at quarterback. You're talking about a team that offensively will probably be one of the most productive teams in the country, staying in the ACC Atlantic. Really good quarterback play. I mean, Malik Cunningham is back at Louisville. Now, they've got to make some improvement defensively, but I think Louisville's going to be able to score. They're going to be productive. Florida State's a really interesting team because I think the talent base is pretty good. Florida State has still, under Mike Norvell, been working to get back to that consistent, bowl type level, but they bring back a lot of talent, bring back a lot of experience, went out and brought in some big time players in the transfer portal, former Memorial Day star Winston Wright from West Virginia at wide receiver. You have had success in the transfer portal in recent years when you think about Jermaine Johnson coming in from Georgia. I think Florida State's been able to get better through the transfer portal, and I think looking at Jordan Travis, Kevin, he's a guy that's ready for that next step. So I think Florida State's going to be better. I do agree with Lawton over in the Coastal at Miami. You look at Tyler Van Dyke, you like what he's done at quarterback. I think the wide receiver running back room is very talented. Some of the ACC Coastal kind of stays the same in that you sort of expect the craziness. I mean, Virginia with Brennan Armstrong is going to be productive. Georgia Tech, kind of hard to get a feel. Jeff Sims, really good. Virginia Tech, you have some transition there. What's going to happen? But I think the ACC top to bottom is better. I think Wake Forest is a bona fide top 20 team. I think NC State is a top 15 type team. I think Clemson is a top 5, top 10 type team. I think Miami should be preseason ranked. I think Florida State could get into that discussion. I think Louisville could get into that discussion. Virginia is a team nobody wants to mess with. I mean, North Carolina, they've recruited really well. It's a better league than people think.
Yeah, and again, at the end of the day, BJ, and you know this, we've said this for years, you could talk about how the league's improved, and you can point to the fact, and there's been a lot of times, BJ, where you look at the draft and say the ACC is putting in the second most players in the league behind the SEC. And there's no shame in that. Obviously, you're compared to the SEC a lot, but the ACC for a while had been putting in the second most amount of draft picks into the National Football League. I think recently the Big Ten has had a few more, but at the end of the day, you've got to win some of those big non-conference games. I think a couple of years ago you had Georgia beat Georgia Tech, Florida beat Florida State, Clemson was beating South Carolina, Louisville beat Kentucky. You kind of had that big end of the year head-to-head against the SEC, but you've also got to go out. You can't have the losses to Northern Illinois on your schedule. You can't have some of those
you gotta
things out
have
there as well.
The consistency, and you've had programs that have had that. I mean, I didn't even mention Pitt last segment, obviously the defending ACC champ, thinking about Kenny Pickett moving on to the league, but that's still a very talented roster. I think defensively, Pitt is going to be really, really dynamic yet again. They're still going to produce offensively. Pat Narduzzi has done a really good job, but I think when you look at those programs, Bill Connolly with the S&P Plus had 5 teams in his ESPN preseason top 25 for SP Plus. You had Clemson at 5, Pitt at 13, NC State at 15, Miami at 20, Florida State at 25, and I think Wake Forest is going to be a little better than people think as well. But you're right. I mean, it's a multifaceted thing for the ACC because the ACC does not have the benefit of the doubt where if your top programs aren't producing, people are going to go, oh, well, it's still a great league, right? Like in the SEC, if Alabama has a down year, well, you still have programs that have developed and have that brand equity, of course. In the ACC, if Clemson has a perceived down year and Florida State and Miami aren't necessarily at an all-time high, as is the case right now, people are going to look and go, Pitt, yeah, Wake Forest, yeah, NC State, yeah, and those programs are better than people realize. I mean, look at the NFL draft. I mean, these programs are well represented. You talk about Pitt and NC State. NC State might have the number 1 overall pick in Akeem Ekwonu, and Kenny Pickett is going to be a first-round pick at quarterback, maybe a top 10 pick at quarterback. So these programs are producing NFL talent. North Carolina, of course, with Sam Howell might be a first-round pick. But I think the key is, like you said, don't have those out-of-conference losses where it just crushes your momentum, right? Where, you're in the top 25, and I think Pitt lost to Western Michigan last year, and it's like that. Even though those games are tougher than people realize, that hurts your momentum and kind of the overall resume at the end of the year. Or, Georgia Tech losing to Northern Illinois. It's just hard to build continuity and stability when that happens. But I think Clemson's going to be better. Again, Pitt is going to be good. NC State's going to be good. Just talking off the top of my head here, Wake Forest is I think better than people realize. But top to bottom, I think this is a good, solid ACC. I do. I mean, do you have a sense in your mind after Clemson, just quickly, is there a second team you like? Is it NC State?
I think is NC State, I think will be there. I think, people keep talking about Miami, and I think that's one that people will keep saying it until they actually do something. It's hard to buy in on them. But the Coastal Division, I think you just never know. We've been waiting for a decade, right, for someone to take control of that division. But at the end of the day, isn't the Coastal Division what people claim they want in college football, right? I mean, you hear, man, it's Georgia, Clemson, Alabama again, and one other team in the college football playoff. Literally in the ACC Coastal Division, nobody has a single clue who's going to win that. It's been, 8 years, 8 different winners, and there's only 7 teams in the conference. And you could claim really 9 because Notre Dame, although there weren't divisions that year, did go. So, I mean, you could make a case that they played an Atlantic team, that Notre Dame could have been a 9th different team in 9 years, where nobody's gone back-to-back in almost a decade. Nobody's had multiple runs at it except for Pitt. I think Pitt was one of the early ones that started that run, so it wasn't like Pitt was like going back-to-back. That's what people say they want for college football, is that ultimate parity where literally anybody can win on any given Saturday, anybody can win the division and get to the conference championship game, and yet the people look at the ACC and say, well, it's not very good. Well, if you're going to have a division that's that balanced, you probably aren't going to have teams going 10-2 that often, or 11-1, or 12-0 at the end of the day. But I think the ACC needs somebody to step up and be recognized nationally good as being maybe right there with Clemson or a step behind and say, look, they're probably not quite there, but they're top 10 and knocking on the door. Maybe NC State could be that team. We've got more to come. It's 3 and Out in the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. BJ, you got college basketball winding down for the major conferences as a lot of the, I guess I don't think they really refer to them as that in college basketball. The P5 conferences all will have their conference tournaments next week, but you've got a lot of D2 tournaments this week. Georgia Southern and the Sun Belt tournaments getting started and underway. So a lot of teams locally, Savannah State, Georgia Southern, rock and rolling here through their conference tournaments.
Yeah, I think tonight you have the Savannah State men against Tuskegee in the SEAC quarterfinals, the Georgia Southern men against Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt first round, and then tomorrow, Friday, you have the Savannah State women versus Albany State in the SEAC semifinals, and the Georgia Southern women against UT Arlington in the Sun Belt quarterfinals. But I know you were at senior night for Savannah State, and these programs have big time opportunities here in the postseason. Or the women with their win. Both the men and women have won games already, but the women 27-1.
Yeah, 26-1 and
26-1. Wow,
it's impressive. Just touching on the men earlier this year, I remember I went to a game them playing Coastal Georgia down the street, and they lost a really tough game, but didn't have a lot of the guys. But since they've gotten a lot of their guys back, they've been able to look pretty good this year, and they have a chance to win the SIAC. I know they're the third seed in the East, but they actually have a puncher's chance to win the whole thing. And as far as the girls, I mean, they're the best team in school history, whether it's on the boys or girls side. They're 26-1. That speaks for itself. The one lone loss they had, they've already avenged that loss in the regular season. And they'll see, either one of the top two teams, Benedict or Tuskegee, who's on the other side. They're going to have to play each other. But just shout out to both teams, but especially the girls. I know a lot of them have went through ups and downs as far as coming in as a D1 recruit for their first 2 years and then having to transition to D2. That's always kind of hard as an athlete in general, coming in and you think you're playing Division I for all 4 years.
Right.
Now you're playing Division II. But to go 26-1 this year and maybe even better, that's crazy.
And again, they are going on today. Georgia Southern men, Coastal Carolina, 8:30, Sun Belt first round. Georgia Southern women, UT Arlington is on Friday. Savannah State on Friday as well. Savannah State men in action tonight as well. So a little bit of conference basketball for your perusal here this evening as we are coming down the home stretch of the regular season and now into conference tournament postseason in college basketball. We're coming right back. Full final hour around the corner. Mike Bratton, SEC Mike from the That SEC podcast, and Matt Michelle join us final hour 3-0. Good to have you here, 3 and Out on this Thursday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, as we enter the final hour of 3 and Out. We'll hear from Matt Michelle, Orlando Sentinel, coming up in just a little bit. And joining us here on the show as we look at spring practices going on all across the SEC. SEC Mike from that SEC podcast, Mike Bratton, joins us here on the show. Mike, welcome. How are you?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on. As you look around the SEC here in the spring, what storyline captures your attention the most as you go around the league?
Ooh, well, I mean, we always spend too much time at the quarterback. So it always, for me, it always comes back to the quarterbacks and all the competitions we got. I think Texas A&M is probably the biggest one because, that was such a mixed bag for the Aggies last year. They had so much, and they were able to beat Alabama, but they weren't able to beat any of the Mississippi schools or Arkansas. So I think A&M, LSU, some of these high-profile teams having quarterback controversies, that's always the thing that I'm kind of most intrigued about when we enter a spring camp.
Mike, Georgia, obviously the defending national champs. They'll get started soon. You have some key guys to replace, of course, 14 players at the NFL Combine. But what's kind of your sense for Georgia here as they defend? Do you think this is a top 2-3 team in the preseason?
Well, I mean, they certainly have the talent, don't they? Now the question is, I hate to even do this because it seems like it doesn't matter what Stetson Bennett does, people are going to doubt him. But, he's going to go, not to say he was a system quarterback by any means, because I thought throughout the regular season he was pretty outstanding. But he did have that defense to rely on. He had some elite running backs to help him out. Now he's got to basically become the face of the offense, and Georgia may have to outscore people. Now, I certainly think they can do that 10 times a game. It should be 10 times next season, but can they do it 12 times? That's going to be critical to see if Georgia really is another national contender. But I certainly think they've got far more talent than anybody in the East. So they're going to be the runaway favorite once again in the East. But can they beat Alabama or A&M if that's who they got to face? I'm just not convinced at this point that Stetson can get them there being just the leader of the team, so to speak.
And how hard is it to go back-to-back? We've seen some teams go back to the national championship game and not win it. But even with Nick Saban in Alabama, it was kind of the joke of, it's not his year to win it this time because they'll win one and not win it the next year, then win it again. But how hard do you think it is just to carry that expectation and try to pull off the back-to-back?
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest question for Kirby and company is just, they are in a unique position just as for 41 years they were doubted and no one thought, that the curse would be broken, but obviously they broke it. They smashed it and they were the most dominant team last year. But, like you said, there's been program after program after program that has reached the mountaintop, but only Nick Saban has been able to stay up there for a sustained amount of time. And he's really done it 2 or 3 times longer than anybody's ever done it. So, can Georgia do that without those doubters, without that edge? It's certainly much harder to do than I think people even anticipate, but they've got the loaded roster to get there. So, I think that given the fact they were so doubted and people didn't think that streak would ever come to an end, I don't think that, they need those doubters to fuel them because, man, he just broke the biggest streak in the history of college football in my mind.
Mike, who this spring do you think is positioned to possibly emerge as team number 2 in the SEC East and maybe the top challenger to Georgia?
I mean, that's really tough because you got Kentucky, Tennessee, certainly are going to be in the mix. I love Spencer Rattler from what I've been watching of his footage there at Oklahoma. I don't think he's going to win the Heisman or anything. Stuff that talk is ridiculous. But he's just such an upgrade over what they had. If they won 7 games with a GA and an FCS quarterback, just imagine how many they could potentially win with a guy that I think right now is the third best quarterback. Probably the second best quarterback in the SEC East. I think he's better than Stetson Bennett. So I think Carolina's probably going to win at least 8 or 9 games this year. You got to throw them into the mix. And I know Dan Mullen and company, they were a joke last season. A horrible coaching job, and that's why he's no longer there. But it's not like Billy Napier's taken over a completely empty cupboard. So I think the Gators potentially. I think they're going to slow start, but I think they're going to finish strong. And I think the Gators are going to be in the mix by the end of the season.
Mike Bratton, SEC Mike of that SEC podcast, joining us here on 3 and Out, and speak to that Florida team. It seems like it's been Florida and Georgia, more so Georgia, obviously, in the last couple of years, dominating that side. Is Florida, as you said, they could be better towards the end of the year. Are they good enough to be that kind of level come Halloween, i.e. the cocktail party there in Jacksonville?
Well, I just think the ultimate wild card with them is, of course, Anthony Richardson. And we don't even know if he's going to be the starting quarterback. But from what little we've seen of him when he's healthy, and that's another thing, can he stay healthy? If he's able to stay healthy, and if he continues to progress, and he embraces this Billy Napier system, heck, he might be the quarterback that nobody's talking about right now in the SEC that emerges as, one of the best signal callers in the SEC. So if that happens, certainly I think Florida could potentially give Georgia a run for their money. But at the end of the day, I'll take the knowns I know with the Georgia Bulldogs, and that's the fact they got a loaded roster all across the board, than a bunch of unknowns in a first-year coach that we don't even know if he can coach at the SEC level. So I'm not sitting here saying I expect it to happen, but I won't be stunned either if the Gators give the Bulldogs a game there in Jacksonville.
Out west, is this maybe one of Alabama's best teams under Nick Saban?
No, I'm not really buying that hype. I mean, I think people fell in love with Alabama when they won the SEC championship, pulled the stunning upset over Georgia. But last time I checked, they should have lost the Iron Bowl to a 7-loss Auburn. They nearly lost to a 7-loss LSU. LSU had the ball twice in the fourth quarter with the option to win it. Arkansas played them within a touchdown. Texas A&M, which lost 4 games, beat them. Tennessee, which was not a great Tennessee team, played with them into the third quarter. So no, I don't think this team's getting way overhyped. I do buy the fact that they probably should be the favorite in the SEC. They probably will be the favorite in the country, but no, I'm not buying the hype that this is going to be the greatest Alabama team ever.
Mike Bratton, SEC Mike, joining us. So that being said, you're not necessarily all in on Alabama. Are you buying the Jimbo Fisher Texas A&M hype that's also out there here in the preseason?
No, I'm not really buying that either, because I think Jimbo's doing a great job building that thing up. Certainly, I mean, he just hauled in what some people are saying the greatest recruiting class of all time. But how do you lose to both Mississippi schools? You lose to Arkansas. You lose to an LSU team that had fired their coach and they had some opt-outs. And I don't know. It's baffling. And I'm not sitting here saying Jimbo's a terrible coach, but last year he was average at best. And that ain't going to cut it. With the money he's making, with the talent he's got on his roster, he's got to get that quarterback situation solved. I never really saw Kellen Mond take that next step. He was a very good player. I'll give him that. But, he was there for 3 seasons under Jimbo. The way Jimbo's hyped up, he should have been All-American. And so, no, I've still got my reservations on Jimbo. I certainly think they can be in that mix, and they will be in that mix. But no, I'm not buying the hype that A&M's going to reach the college football playoff this year or anything.
Brian Kelly and LSU. I mean, what do you expect out of them this season, and how big of a spring is it for the Tigers?
Yeah, kind of like Florida. I mean, I think LSU will probably start slow, but I think they'll get better as the season goes on. And that's another program. It's not like LSU's not littered with talent. They've dominated the transfer portal to shore up a lot of their deficiencies. I think LSU is going to be maybe an 8-4, 7-5 type team. And I think by season 2, season 3, that's when you'll really start to see Brian Kelly get going. So they're really, in my mind, not much of a factor this season. And they just have too far to come. We haven't even talked about Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I mean, these are all landmines that LSU has to navigate. I think it's just too much of an uphill climb for LSU this year.
And again, Mike, we don't know for certain, but if you're in the SEC, how do you plan for what's coming? Obviously, you could say, well, maybe we're not quite there yet, but Oklahoma and Texas are coming. Is this a year that, if you think you have it, you might want to try to maximize on that, because it's going to become even tougher in the years to come, obviously?
Yeah, possibly. But the way I look at it differently. I look at it like, State Kentucky and you're recruiting against Oklahoma State in the years to come, are you going to go to the minor leagues or are you going to go to the professional, the mini NFL? I think every team in the SEC, that's Arkansas all the way down to Vanderbilt, they are just going to have such an advantage over the rest of even the Power Five. I mean, who in the heck is going to want to go in the Big Ten when you can go to the SEC? And I'm not even talking about Alabama or Georgia or any of these schools. I'm talking Ole Miss, Mississippi State, where all the talent is, where all the best coaches are, where all the fans and the viewership. I mean, I think this is going to change the game in the SEC. So and we're already starting to see it with, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee. These teams are nailing prospects in the transfer portal. The transfer portal has really elevated the bottom of the SEC, and I think that's just going to continue to be the case as the league gets more and more powerful. And we got NIL and transfer portal and all this. It all serves the SEC, in my opinion.
SEC Mike Bratton joining us here on 3 and Out. Mike, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. He joins us talking spring football and certainly storylines galore around the SEC, BJ. But as he said from the jump, everybody's going to talk about the quarterbacks, and, well, the SEC's got plenty of those.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask you. Just about everybody we talk about or talk to about SEC spring football says, hey, what about Stetson Bennett? Are you surprised at that?
Only because that's the nature of college football. And I say the nature of college football in this respect, and that everybody knows Stetson's story, and the pressure that exists in college football to play the guys that everybody knows and that everybody knows was a, quote, highly sought after recruit is immense. Because now with the transfer portal, you see the wringing of hands that is, well, if Stetson plays, does that mean Brock Vandegrift's going to transfer because he's not playing? Or, and then you say, well, now we're stacking up quarterbacks behind them. So I understand it from a fan standpoint and don't think that the coaches don't feel that pressure because, again, even at Alabama, where you're winning championships, there was pressure to put Tua in, and they were winning every game, right? It was like, why is Jalen Hurts playing? He's not throwing for 500 yards. Tua was this 5-star recruit. We got to put him in. There was pressure to put Tua in at Alabama, where you have maybe the most solid winning coach in college football. There's no, trust what he's doing. And there was pressure to do that. So I think the pressure to recruit guys and play them quickly is out there, so you keep these stars at home. I think that's one kind of thing in this age of football, BJ, that you don't want is, yeah, they recruit well, but half of them transfer out. And that's a narrative that
I understand that.
No, I'm saying, but that's a narrative that people will use against you, whether it's true, whether it's fair or not. Recruiting is a dirty, nasty, ugly game. And people will say whatever it takes to try to get an advantage. And if you kind of have the thing of, look, you may not get a chance to play because there's so-and-so over there, and you may not get a chance to play.
Yes.
And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that is a narrative because most people want to go out there and this is the thing. I just want to compete. And then you see more players in the transfer portal than there's ever been. That sounds like guys want you to say what we really want to do. We want to play. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, but this is what I'm saying, Kevin. But this is what I'm saying, and I understand. Yes, talent everywhere when you're at Alabama, Georgia. Yeah. But I'm a little surprised. I understand it, but you're talking about. Cam, you and Christian are Georgia fans. Do you think there's a chance? In your mind, is there a real quarterback competition this fall or this spring? You think there is? Christian has said there could be. Do you think there's a real?
I think there is, but I think it's obviously still slanted towards Stetson. He won you a
that
national
would just really surprise me. That's all I'm saying.
It would surprise me as well. But don't think that there's not pressure to play those guys because again, I'm not just trying to say this to single out Georgia. We saw this a few years ago at Clemson. Trevor Lawrence, 5-star recruit. Kelly Bryant did not lose a game. Was Kelly Bryant a 5-star recruit? No, he was not. Was Kelly Bryant widely known as this is the best quarterback in high school football coming here? No, he was not. And 4 games in, Kelly Bryant suddenly said, I'm going to transfer and Trevor Lawrence is playing. Why is that? I'm saying. So we shouldn't be surprised by anything in college football. I just point out, well, there's 3 examples. Stetson at Georgia, Kelly Bryant at Clemson, and Tua at Alabama with Jalen Hurts. That's three of the best programs in the country. All have had winning quarterbacks hit the bench, hit the transfer portal because there was a hot stud behind him that people wanted to see get playing time. So I'm not surprised. That was the question you asked. So do I think it's right? Not necessarily, but I'm not surprised by any of that people will be clamoring for open competition, given that they want to see the five-star guys out there on the field. And again, that's kind of the short-sighted nature of fans. Like, bro, you got a guy that's winning games. Like, just why don't you go with the guy that's winning games? But I think that is a bygone era, and stars win out over production, unfortunately, sometimes in college football, because you want to make the recruits happy. As Ben has said, promises get made on the recruiting.
It's going to be a storyline.
Certainly. But as Ben has said, promises get made on the recruiting trail, and you don't want to have that revel. Kirby said I was going to play. Here I am 2 years in, and Stetson's playing. I haven't got on the field. Bro, he won your national championship. He said I was going to play. I haven't got in there yet. I'm going to go somewhere else because and that's the narrative they are fighting against in college football. We'll come back. Matt Murschel, Orlando Sentinel, will join us here on 3 and Out, Southern Pigskin Radio Network. That intro aside, good to be back here on the show. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, glad you're making us a part of your day. Spring practices going on all over the South and including in Tallahassee. Interesting year there for the Seminoles. Joining us here, he covers college football for the Orlando Sentinel. Matt Murschel joins us here on 3 and Out. Matt, welcome. How are you?
Pretty good. How you guys doing today?
Good. Obviously, fans are waiting for things to turn around in Tallahassee. Might they see some of that here in 2022?
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, I think, when you look at what Mike Norvell's gone through in the first couple seasons there, you almost have to write off 2020 because of the pandemic, the situation he inherited. He didn't get a chance to really have a spring practice. He had to basically take over a roster that was devoid of a lot of experience and athleticism. So I always write 2020 off, I think. And then, I think last season, he did a good job of adding some players through the transfer portal. He got kind of struck lightning in a bottle, when he got Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas, the two edge rushers who were really kind of really elevated their defense last year, brought in a guy like Mackenzie Milton to help out at the quarterback room. This year going into the season, he did the same sort of thing. And he went out and got, 4 or 5 transfers through the, wide receiver position he feels like will maybe help him out. Guy like Micah Pittman from Oregon, Winston Wright, who comes in from West Virginia. Johnny Wilson's a tall, lengthy receiver he got from Arizona State. And then he added a couple pieces on the offensive line in transfers with Caden Lyles and Bless Harris. That's going to probably help shore up that offensive line. And then defensively, again, this is a young team that had to really kind of throw a lot of young guys out there to see some playing time. But then he also added a couple pieces as well that he believes are kind of going to step up and replace guys like Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas, a guy in Jared Verse, who's a transfer, comes in from Albany. So I think this is a much more experienced unit, a roster that's more what Mike Norvell is starting to want to build there. And I think that spells a good opportunity there going into 2022.
What do you expect from Jordan Travis at quarterback, and how big of a spring is this for him?
It's huge because this was really the first time that he comes into the spring where it's his team. Last year, Mackenzie Milton was brought in, and I think there were a lot of people who thought Mackenzie was going to take over right from the start. Jordan had a chance to kind of learn a little bit from Mackenzie, got a lot of experience and leadership values that he kind of took away from that experience. Now he comes into this quarterback room, and it's really his team. The behind him, there are a couple guys that basically are talented but haven't had a lot of experience. Tate Rodemaker is one of them, and they bring in a true freshman in AJ Duffy. He was a talented quarterback. But this is going to be Jordan Travis's team, and Jordan kind of turned things up, in the second half of the season last year with showcased his running ability. Plus, he's got a strong, accurate arm. I think another year under this offense, another year under Mike Norvell in his tutelage, and I think there's a chance for him to kind of take that next logical step and kind of elevate his game.
Matt Murschel, Orlando Sentinel, joining us here on 3 and Out. And how important is it to get that offense going? As we kind of know Mike Norvell as being an offensive guy, how important is that offense to take a big step forward and then put points on the board?
Yeah, that's going to be the thing for them. They're going to have to find ways to get those opportunities and get and score when they get them. Last year I think one of the things that hurt this team, especially early on, is self-inflicted mistakes. They turned the ball over too many times, made dumb mistakes that you're really, get it. You're a young team. You've got some young players. They're going to make those kind of mistakes, but those mistakes seem to happen, in an opportune moments, whether it was in the red zone, whether it was, in a chance to maybe take advantage of a weaker defense. They just weren't able to do that. So this time around, their offense is going to be key. They're going to have to get that running game going. That's going to be crucial for them. They lose a guy in Jayshon Corbin, who was a transfer the last 2 years, has really kind of came on last year, had over 800 yards. They've got some talent there, but they're going to need someone to step up. And they added, like I said, some key pieces at wide receiver. Florida State has been known for producing these dynamic, explosive players on offense, and they really haven't seen that the last 3 or 4 years. So they're going to have to get some of those guys to come in there and make some plays. I think if they can score some points, I think they've got a defense that's going to have an opportunity maybe to shut some teams down.
You mentioned Jermaine Johnson, the Georgia transfer last year, who was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Florida State's going to be a lot more experienced, I believe, on defense, but how do they find a way to replace Johnson?
Well, that's going to be the key. I mean, like I said, I think Jared Verse, who's, like I said, mentioned the transfer, comes in. I mean, he's going to be a big part of it. They got some guys, I think, that stepped up last year that showed some flashes of potential. You know, Fabian Lovett was one of those. Jarrett Jackson, Dennis Briggs, he looked good early on, but he got hurt and missed most of the season. They've got some guys there that have kind of potential, but they need to take that step. That's where this spring is going to be huge for them. Those guys really need to take that step forward and have an opportunity to showcase that, you know, that kind of pass rushing ability that they've really needed. They lacked that in 2020. 2021, obviously they were better, but half of their sacks came from those two guys, and Johnson and Thomas. So they're going to have to find ways to replace that. And I think some of that also is going to come to the fact that their secondary is going to have to play better. I mean, they're going to not have to allow big plays. They're going to have to find ways to keep close coverage, and that in turn makes a quarterback have to wait a second or two longer, and that will help out when it comes to the pass rush.
And again, how important is that when you're talking about divisional foes like Wake Forest, NC State, who are going to come in and try to throw the ball all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be huge. And that's one of the things they got burned on, you know, is they gave up too many big plays through the air. And, you know, we saw teams take advantage of that. You know, Jacksonville State, you know, beat them on basically a Hail Mary. It was a 54-yard pass that they had 2 or 3 opportunities to tackle the receiver before he got into the end zone. They just didn't do that. So those are plays you can't make when you're a team at the level of Florida State. So they got guys like that who learned. They brought in a couple other players as well, transfers. Greedy Vance, a kid from Louisville, who they feel like maybe can step in and help out. These guys have all got to step up. If they can kind of lock down some of that coverage and they can buy their line a little bit more time, I think that's where maybe they could take advantage of it. And they also need to be able to get to the quarterback. They need to find ways to make quarterbacks uncomfortable. They haven't been able to do that as much the last couple of years, but I think if they can find a way to do that, I think that's going to limit them.
Matt, is there pressure on Mike Norvell? You mentioned the Jacksonville State loss last year. I know that was really tough. What's kind of the sense of the Florida State fan base here as spring gets underway?
Well, I think they're kind of, you know, you want to say everyone's optimistic, but I think they're cautiously optimistic right now. I mean, they realize that listen, Mike Norvell, 2020 was a challenge. 2021 got a little bit better, but it was a slow start. There's still some who question, you know, is this program going in the right direction? Believe me, you got a guy like Deion Sanders, who's having a former Florida State great, who's having, you know, a great start to his coaching career at Jackson State. You know, there are people who believe that maybe he's the guy that should come in here. You know, so I think Norvell knows there's going to be some pressure there. They feel like, but there's the administration feels like things are going in the right direction. You know, recruiting has been a lot better over the last 12 to 18 months. They're starting to get those top 25 classes that they're used to getting and signing. They're starting to build some of the talent level there. They're doing a better job in fundraising. Fundraising has been really good. Mike Norvell's been out there with new AD Michael Alford. They've been out fundraising. They're trying to build a new football operations facility. They feel like if they can continue to upgrade their facilities, that's going to help them out in the long run. They fell behind for a while there, if you can imagine, you know, about 2016, 2017. And you saw schools like Clemson and, you know, Wake Forest and these other programs all of a sudden start spending that money, and they kind of fell behind. Now they're starting to play catch up. I think they're getting there as well. But I mean, if they can come back and they can get to be bowl eligible, I think that's going to be huge for Mike Norvell. If they take a step back, you know, then I think it's all bets off, because I think they'll feel a lot of pressure to make a move. But let's not forget, they're on the hook for they paid a lot of money to get rid of Willie Taggart. It was like a $20 million buyout. They don't want to have to find themselves doing the same sort of thing again and putting themselves behind the 8 ball when it comes to financials.
As you said, on the field, where are they in relation to the ACC Atlantic Division? I mean, obviously Clemson didn't blow a whole lot of people out last year, even though they still won 10 games. Where are they in terms of competing in that division? I know you talked about bowl eligibility, but have they closed the gap on those teams in front of them?
I think they've closed some of the gap. I mean, you know, I don't think they're yet ready to compete, you know, contend for, you know, a division crown right now. I mean, I think they have a little bit more growing to do. This is a team right now that's got 81 underclassmen on its roster going into spring. You know, so again, young team that's going to have to find a way to win some games. But they know where they have to be. They saw what Clemson was like, what Clemson has done the last 6 or 7 years. They know NC State's at that elite level. They know Wake has continued to do that. So they know where the bar is, and they feel like they're going to get there soon enough. Again, I always caution Florida State fans because, I've had someone tell me, if we don't get to 12 wins, then it's a failure. I mean, to me, if you get to 6 or 7 wins this year, I think that's the next logical step. And then maybe the next year after that, when all these young guys get a little bit older, I think that's when you're going to see Florida State maybe start to make a big push.
Matt Murschel covers college football for the Orlando Sentinel, our guest here on 3 and Out. Matt, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Appreciate it. Matt Murschel joining us here on 3 and Out. And as you said, Mike Norvell still in the growing process and may be saved because of financial implications if they don't get it turned around. But certainly that is a program that, BJ, if you would have said in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, that by the 2020s, Florida State would be in a run of 3-4 years without competing for a bowl game, you would have said, no, that's not possible.
It's a big spring, and I think it is a big season. You have a lot of talent returning. Jordan Travis, he mentioned the quarterback, but something else, we talked about with the schedule release, Georgia Southern's schedule the other day, and Georgia Tech's schedule before that, and Florida State this fall, I believe, opens up or early on, they play LSU. And then you're talking about you have Clemson, you have Miami, you have Florida. I think, Cam, you were telling me they play Louisiana out of the Sun Belt, who's been a top 25 team. So another really challenging schedule for FSU.
We've got more to come here. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here, 3 and Out, on this Thursday. Well, we had a meeting today with MLB and the Players Association, BJ, kind of, in that you had a representative, a negotiator from the owners, and a negotiator from the Players Association meet for about 90 minutes. And by all accounts, the same stuff that they said on Tuesday was said, and they shook hands and said, "You going to charge your guys for this meeting?" "Yeah." "You going to charge it?" "Yeah." Okay. So everybody got their billable hours today for a meeting that really changed nothing.
I was going to say, you say meeting. I mean,
and it's funny is like they are the negotiators for each side. They both know that they can't walk into that room and go, "Yep, this is good." Right? So you had no players there. Tony Clark wasn't there. You did not have the clown commissioner there from Major League Baseball. You didn't have any of the owners there. So, okay, the fact those two meeting, I guess, is something, but nobody in that room could make a deal.
This is what I'm asking you. This is going back to the word meeting. If Manfred wasn't there and Tony Clark wasn't there and no players were there and these two people were there, what was hoped to be accomplished? Like what was realistic to come out of that?
I guess just to continue the conversation, but I mean, my guess is there was no new proposal done. And obviously if there was, it would be like, well, I can't say yes to that. I'm gonna have to go take it back to my people. And if I give you a proposal, you're gonna have to go take it back to your people. And it's still nothing would get done because those two guys aren't going to be the ones that sign off and stamp it that it's all said and good. I think, BJ, reading the tea leaves here and trying to get some insight, just judging by what has slipped out from the owners, what you hear from the players, is that the owners are perfectly willing to not have this thing start until May because they feel like April is just a month where you get what you get. It's usually not very much.
What kind of attitude is that?
I'm not saying it's a good attitude.
I know you're not. I'm not asking you guys. I'm just asking kind of the ether. Like what is that? You own baseball teams and you're okay just for a month not having baseball to prove a point?
You'll see the players. And I think, saw Dallas Braden come out today and say, look, this was the plan from the owners all along. They don't want to play the first month of the season. They know if it gets down to 100, they can miss up to 25 games and still get the full TV sharing money, which I think is very high for a lot of teams out there. They still get their full TV deals. So they can miss up to 25 games, still get their full TV deals, money coming in, and they continue to make all their money and have subsequently eliminated a calendar in which most of them say we don't really start generating true profitable revenue until May, June, July, August, when our attendance goes up, when more people start visiting the ballpark, we get better weather, some of those things, and we start working towards a pennant race. I understand that. To me, is a short-term view and not addressing the damage you're doing to the sport, but that is the feeling around baseball that the owners are cool waiting to this thing out until to start in May 1st. The players seem to kind of think that's their position, which is why they're like, we're not going to get a real proposal until they're ready to start a month out, maybe from May 1st, and get us ready to go. They just don't believe it. And how much are they willing to move? And we talked about this earlier, BJ. If you're the players, how much do you say, well, if you're not really feeling any pain, you're going to try to stick us with a bad deal again? How much are you willing to ride this out from a player standpoint? Because I feel like right now, public sentiment is on the side of the players because the owners haven't moved that much. The owners are out there claiming they're not making money. You have Rob Manfred lying to everybody saying Major League Baseball is not a good investment. It's like, you represent the owners and you're saying publicly this is a bad investment. You just basically publicly went out there and said, don't invest in baseball. You can only make millions and millions of dollars every year. Not a great event. That's complete ridiculousness. So what damage are you doing? To me, I guess they're willing to lay that off, knowing that certain fans will come back regardless because they love the product. And really, once you set the business aside, don't give a rip about who
so you're saying they don't care.
Your diehards don't.
No. I'm saying the owners, don't care. Don't care.
Because I think a lot of owners look at.
Then they don't love the sport. Then they don't love the game.
Well, that's clear. I mean, that's clear. I think some of them do, but you got to have a certain number of owners sign off before you can do anything. So I think some of them do, but yeah, a lot of them look at, which was a big criticism of Liberty Media. You look at the Braves as a P&L, a profit and loss. That's how we're running this thing. This is how much we're willing to spend. This is how much profit we want to get. And that's what we're going to do. and don't really care if we have an exciting product, don't really care if game day is any different, don't really care if anything else changes. That's what we're willing to do. And I think you have some owners who aren't even willing to do that. They're saying, look, if I don't spend any money, and with revenue sharing and with the luxury tax, I can pocket a couple extra
I just
million
don't
or so
know
and not have to spend it on
how
anything.
you can be in charge of. I mean, Kevin, Cam, look, Kevin, you are.
That's because you live in reality of the. I mean, I'm just saying because you live in a.
I'm saying here's why I'm concerned about the.
And you're also looking at it as a fan.
Normally, you're very optimistic about baseball. I think you have been, just kind of looking back, and now your tone has changed. I think all of us are looking at this going, there's not going to be baseball. I mean, do you expect there to be? I mean, I'm not trying to say that to be Debbie Downer. I'm just saying that from read the room. I mean, that the owners, when you have Rob Manfred chuckling about canceling games, I mean, can you imagine? And you saw the backlash he got for that. Can you imagine if Roger Goodell stood in front of a microphone and came out, was like, hey, everybody, good to see you. By the way, 4 NFL games are all gone for everybody. Good to see you, man. People will be, sticking him for that. Like, that's not supposed to be a happy moment for a guy in charge of the league to say, we're canceling our product because we don't have an agreement. Like, nobody should be smiling in that scenario.
That you made earlier that I liked it was in the midst of COVID. You made all that money and could have been playing baseball throughout the COVID pandemic, and they still put that on hold. And what you only played,
60 games, yeah.
60 some odd games where a lot of money could have been made. The league could have boomed because all eyes was on them. The NBA wasn't on. They were doing whatever they were doing.
Yeah, they were doing the bubble thing.
They were doing the bubble thing. The NFL definitely wasn't on. That's not football season. You don't have soccer on. You don't have nothing. Baseball was the prime and center position to put it on the forefront street, not just for the U.S., but for the entire world, and you still couldn't get along. So how can I expect you to get along now when everything's peachy clean and there's nothing really that's going on?
Right.
Well, it's not going to happen within the next month. I just don't
no, I mean, I think you're right, and that's why I mean, and it goes back to the talk about Rob Manfred, and Kevin, you had an epic breakdown yesterday. But
at the end of this, he should be fired.
Does he? I mean, does he even?
Does he want it? Maybe, but he carries the owner for the water for the owners. And I just look at him and say, from some of his comments, just from a competency standpoint, if I'm the players, and again, he's overseeing baseball, so he kind of has like punishment powers and things of that nature. If guys are doing steroids, he can put out stuff like, "Hey, we're going to start checking pitchers and their hats every time they come off the field for foreign substances." Like the fact that this guy has such a disdain for the product he represents is appalling, and he should be fired. And if I'm an owner that cares about the game, I'm saying Rob's got to go, man. Like, you cannot have the public mouthpiece out there calling the championship trophy a hunk of metal. You cannot have the public mouthpiece out there talking about, it's a bad investment to be involved with Major League Baseball. You can't have the front man of the league saying these things. Like, I get you're trying to frame it in a way where you're trying to cry, oh, poor, pitiful us. But I put it back. Roger Goodell runs the most successful league on the planet. If I ever heard Roger Goodell come out and say, players, man, look, NFL ownership's really been kind of poor, man. That's just not a great investment. People will be going, what are you talking about? Like, you're talking down the sport. We know that's not true. Why would you publicly say owning an NFL team just doesn't bring in the money? Like, why would you talk down the sport like that, even trying to win a negotiation? You could say things like, guys, owning a Major League Baseball team is profitable. It maybe wasn't as profitable as we'd hoped for. How do we change that? That's a different argument. He didn't say that. He said, you're better off with, 401k. Like the stock market gives better returns. That's a ludicrous statement by any stretch of the imagination. Just the appreciation of franchise alone. So I think if it's me at the end of this, I would hope Rob Manfred is gone, because I've said this a number of times, for as much as people had a problem with Bud Selig, I think, as a former owner of the Milwaukee Brewers, cared about the direction of the game and what it was doing. Bud Selig screwed up. He had an all-star game, ended a tie. You know what he did? He fixed it and said, we're going to add more players to the all-star team. We're going to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We're going to make sure that we make some corrections to the game. People got mad about PEDs. Bud Selig came out and said, we're going to start to crack down. Now, did he turn a blind eye to it while it was happening? Maybe so. But when a public outcry was there, he went and fixed the game. He said, this cannot continue for the betterment of our game to have dudes that look like, Monstars out there hitting 70 home runs every single year, knowing that, it's probably illegitimate on some level with steroids. He took measures to fix that. I mean, what has Rob Manfred done that has been for the betterment of the game? All he talks about when he opens his pie hole is shortening the game. We get down to the last day of negotiations, and we all of a sudden start to hear crap about pitch clocks and oversized bases and stuff like that. Like, nobody cares about that when you're trying to close out a negotiation. Like, stop bringing that stuff up. Putting runners on second base in extra innings because you, quote, want to shorten games in extra innings. Like, stop. Like, just like, what has he done to try to forward the game? It ain't much. It isn't much. We'll come back. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Thursday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett. We got some little basketball coming up tonight. Hawks and Bulls. Hawks trying to keep pace to get in that playoff picture, BJ, and certainly Chicago 10 games ahead of them in the win column. So a challenge tonight for Atlanta if they're going to try to continue to get in the playoff picture here.
Got to play better down the stretch. Should have beat Chicago a couple of nights ago. You had Boston. You had a big lead at halftime. Just got to play better down the stretch, and I think the Hawks at home will do well tonight.
Yeah, and again, I think this is one that's going to be fun to watch this team coming down the stretch and see if they can probably get. I think the big goal is get out of that play-in series to give you a little comfort in the postseason. We'll see you tomorrow. A Friday edition around the corner. Thanks to Matt Marshall, Mike Bratton for joining us here in the final hour of the show. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio.